This week, we are discussing winter hiking essentials, and you are listening to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Albert, and this week we are going to be discussing winter hiking essentials, the gear that gets you there and back again, keeps you warm, keeps you safe, keeps you comfortable as you're out there getting creative, exploring these landscapes, and just taking in winter. I am working on getting over a cold, so at some point my voice might be a little weak. I'm going to do my best to make it through the episode, but if I'm speaking a little softly at times, I do apologize if it's difficult to understand me. This is as good as I've got. I've given it a few days trying to get it back as much as I can, and this is about as good as it's going to get, I think. But before we get too far into this week's topic, I wanted to take a second and extend another huge thank you to Neil Weaver for joining us on the last episode. We had a fantastic discussion about winter landscape photography in Michigan, the many challenges and rewards of shooting overall in the winter. You guys have not listened to it yet. I encourage you to head over to his episode after this one. It is episode 4. Great advice on preparing for your winter trips in the Upper Peninsula, in Michigan, and just in the Great Lakes region in general. Don't forget to check out the links in the show notes to see some of his work. Check out his available prints, and learn more about the workshops that he offers right here in the Great Lakes with another friend of mine, Aubrietta Hope. Their workshops are fantastic. They're just both great people. Highly recommend checking out their stuff. Now, getting into this week's topic. We have some serious cold coming into our area. Despite the cold weather, I spent this past weekend in Chicago shooting around the shorelines of Lake Michigan, and it was just a fantastic time. I hung out with a couple really great photographers in the city. We shot in different areas. We hiked to different little outside areas of the city. It was really fun. I found a lot of places that I didn't even know were out there with these guys, and we had a really good time. But the consistent challenge throughout the experience was the cold. We were getting sprayed by water, crashing off the lake. The wind coming off the lake was just incredible. It was consistently below zero with the wind chill. Certainly one of those occasions where you want to have the right gear. You want to be warm, and it takes special gear to be able to go out there and do that kind of stuff and stay comfortable and stay safe, stay dry, stay warm. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about this week is winter clothing. After the last episode, a few of you actually did reach out and ask for some recommendations. So I wanted to go ahead and put an episode together and let you guys know what I trust in the field. So let's jump right in. Let's talk winter photography gear and staying warm in these conditions. Let's get into this. This all kind of worked out at the perfect time because it just so happens that this week I am actually preparing for my first official winter destination adventure. And as I went through my gear checklist on Friday before I went out to the city, I realized how simple it would be to share it with you guys. So I've gone ahead and included a complete list of everything that I use in my blog. It's linked in the show notes below. But I want to talk about a few of my favorite pieces of gear and why they stand out the most in my mind, and kind of give you guys a baseline idea of how to layer, how to stay warm, and what to look for in equipment that you're out there considering when you're coming up against these types of weather conditions. With this cold weather upon us, it's important to make absolutely sure that you have everything that you need out there to get the best out of your trip. This week, we can expect to see lows all the way down to -50 in some areas here in the Great Lakes region, with single digits being a common factor throughout. So being prepared, being warm, making sure you have the right stuff is huge. But the thing about it is that although, yes, these conditions are extremely cold, they can be incredibly rewarding all the same. Sea smoke fires up under these conditions. You have waves crashing against the lakeshore, covering things in ice, making incredible formations out of basically anything the water can reach. Lighthouses get covered in ice under the right conditions, which is actually something I'm watching myself at the moment because I might flip this week's trip around. We'll see. More updates on that later. But with the proper winter gear, you can get out there, you can check out these amazing winter transformations, you can stay warm, comfortable, and most importantly, focused. That's the whole idea behind this episode is staying in that creative flow. We want to stay focused on our creativity. We want to stay in that flow state. If you're worried about your hands being cold, your toes being cold, you're just cold in general, you're wet, it's not going to be enjoyable. You're just going to want to go home, go back to your car, your hotel, whatever the case might be, and it's just going to fall apart. So we want to go through this so that you guys can get out there, you can enjoy these incredible winter transformations and do so safely, comfortably, and get the shots that these transformations offer. Now, one thing that I do want to put out there, I want to be transparent with you guys about this right up front. Some of these things, they are very expensive. One of the reasons it's taken me so long to get my winter kit dialed in is because it is expensive stuff. But I promise, just like camera gear, you buy the right thing the first time, it's worth it. It's justified. You get what you pay for. I like to compare it to getting a high quality tripod or getting a high quality camera lens or filter system. You just know, you can see the quality, you can feel it. That's the same thing with winter gear. When you get the right thing, you just know immediately. It exudes quality. It feels right. You know you can trust it out there. It'll serve you well. It's just a part of it. But I also want to put out there, I am not sponsored or affiliated with any of these brands. I'm not making any money off of this. I'm not making any money from anybody. These are not affiliate links in my blog. This is just the equipment that I use to get the shot and the things that I know I can rely on in the field. The thing about this is that really each of you will more than likely have to do some of your own research to find what works best for you out there. It does not have to be a huge homework project, but you do want to learn what you need and why you need it, because that's going to be the deciding factor in a lot of your gear choices. For me, I do a lot of technical off-trail hiking, so a lot of my stuff is geared toward warmth to weight ratios and packability. I want to be able to fit this stuff in my backpack, and I want to be able to carry it to the locations that I'm going to. I want it to be lightweight because I don't want to be lugging around an extra 15 pounds of winter gear on my person and in my bag. So as I'm going through looking at things, I'm considering that. I'm considering long distance hikes. I'm considering how much does this item weigh? Am I going to be able to carry it a long distance? What's my total pack weight if I put this into my bag? Things like that. But if that is something that's important to you, definitely do your research, figure out what you want to carry, what you want to wear. It makes a huge difference out there when you're hiking through these cold landscapes, carrying extra weight, wearing extra layers, makes a really big difference. With that said, let's kick it off. Let's start with base layers because that's where the entire layering process begins. This is the layer that goes right up against our skin. Base layers are basically primarily used for moisture management and wicking sweat away from our bodies. But the thing about that is that we don't want to sweat profusely. It's natural to perspirate when we're active, but you don't want to be dripping sweat. You sweat too much, it becomes dangerous. You can get hypothermia. All kinds of problems can arise from it. So that natural perspiration is normal, but don't be so warm that you're just sweating buckets because it's going to cause more problems than solutions. The little sweat that we do produce is managed by the base layers. That's why they're so important, and that's why I want to start that off here. For my base layers, I always look for merino wool. I use it for all my base layers, top and bottom. I have found that the Outdoor Research Alpine Onset Merino 150 hoodie is great for this. It's warm, it'll still insulate if it's wet or damp, and it's tight around the neck with a built-in hood that you could flip up to use as an extra face shield while you're out there. Helps keep your ears warm. really increases its effectiveness in the field. And it's one of the reasons why I like it so much, because that built in hood adds that extra layer that you can apply to your face, your head, whatever, and you don't have to carry an extra item. It's already built into the item for you. And one of the things that I really like about merino wool specifically, not just that hoodie, but merino wool overall, is that if you have to use it for multiple days on a backcountry trip, or if you have limited space in your pack, you can actually wear it multiple times without it starting to stink. And that's huge for those of us that want to pack light. Maybe we're going on a destination trip. You don't want to bring 30 shirts and 30 pairs of pants and everything else to change your clothes over and over again. If you're trying to pack light, if you're trying to bring the minimal amount of equipment, but still remain warm, stay effective, merino wool is definitely a great solution here because it can be worn 2-3 days in a row before it really starts to stink. Another thing I like is that it's so lightweight, you can wash it really easily. So if you're at a hotel, Airbnb, whatever, if it does start to stink, you can rinse it out in the sink, hang it up in the shower, let it dry overnight. It's super lightweight. It'll be dry by morning. You can use it again the next day. Really great system. Really, really great fabric. To make that layer a little bit more efficient, though, at wicking away sweat and keeping me warm, I've found that combining it with a synthetic shirt actually helps quite a bit out there. For me, this is typically my long sleeve Patagonia Capilene Cool shirt. It's a lightweight performance shirt, just helps keep me dry, manage the cold, acts as another thin layer between me and the outside air, but really it can be any kind of synthetic performance shirt as long as it's not cotton. The one thing with base layers is that you do not want to use cotton because if cotton gets wet from sweating or whatever may have gotten it wet, it will lose its insulating properties. That becomes very dangerous because now you just have this wet clothing item on you and it's not doing anything besides making you colder. So, bad news as a base layer, really just winter in general, just avoid cotton. But the combination of the merino base layer mixed with a performance shirt works really well. I highly recommend it. Again, I use the Alpine Onset Merino 150 hoodie paired with a Patagonia Capilene Cool shirt. It's never let me down, keeps me dry, wicks that moisture away, keeps me nice and warm out there. The next thing that we want to consider past that are the mid layers. This is where we're going to trap our warmth and control how warm we actually are with our layers. For me, this is typically going to be fleece of some kind. I'll layer fleeces sometimes based on the conditions and the amount of physical activity required to get to where I'm going. This is kind of that point in the process where you need to consider how hot your body usually runs and then kind of make a decision on your layers off of how demanding the physical activity you're going to be doing actually is. Because again, we don't want to sweat, but we want to stay warm. When you're active, you're going to need fewer layers, but when you stop, you're going to need to put something else on. And that's what we're going to get to here momentarily. But just remember, when you're active, you need to be considering how warm you're going to be as you're active and base your layers off of that. My personal favorite fleeces are the Patagonia R1 and R2. They're lightweight, they're packable, they have an excellent weight to warmth ratio. The R2 is a little thicker than the R1, which is nice for those colder days, but there are times where I just wear the R1 and R2 together on really cold days. Sometimes I'll even do two R1s and an R2 if it's extremely cold, like these days that we have coming up here this week. But another great option here is the Mountain Hardwear Air Mesh hoodie, which is actually the layer that is just basically permanently in my bag, packed away as an extra layer, just in case it's needed. It's one thing that you want to do when you're out there, you're being active, you're going to these places. Always pack an extra layer in your bag just in case. If the wind changes directions, or if you're doing a hike and all of a sudden the wind picks up, whatever the case might be, the conditions change on you. If you're out there, you don't have that extra layer and you start getting cold despite being active, you want to have something on you to help layer up, get you back to a normal, warm body temperature. It's better to have and not need than to need and not have. Just always pack that extra just in case layer to be safe. Now, for those of you that might not be doing the more technical hikes, maybe you're not really concerned with warmth to weight ratios and you're just really looking for warmth, for mid layers, in the past, I've used hoodies, I've used regular everyday fleeces, I've even used insulated flannel jackets. It doesn't have to be a high performance item. It just needs to be something that's going to keep you warm that you don't mind hiking with. Again, we want to consider how active we're going to be before we start choosing our layers because you don't want to sweat, but you want to stay warm. You have to find that fine balance between those two, and eventually you'll get there. But take your time with it. Make sure you have an extra layer in your bag. It will help in a pinch. Next up is jackets. And this is where I think people get confused, or sometimes they might buy too much of a jacket and regret it later. And I want to touch on that. So, when we think cold weather jackets, typically a puffy jacket is probably going to come to mind for a lot of us. And that's a great option. But we need to be aware that there's two different types of down used in these jackets. There's feather down and synthetic down. Feather down's probably the most popular variety of these coats. It's lightweight, it's packable, it's definitely the warmest option available in many cases, but the caveat with it is that it does not maintain its insulating power when it gets wet. And that becomes an issue in certain cases, especially if we start sweating while we're wearing it. Synthetic down is becoming more popular as the technology gets better and better. It's also lightweight, packable, fairly warm depending on the brand that you choose to go with. But synthetic down will keep you warm when it's wet or damp, but it's still not really great to get it wet because eventually it will wet out and soak through. You don't want that. Now, the big difference between these two becomes really important with the activity that you're going to be doing, how strenuous it's going to be, and when to use each one. For active pursuits, you always want to use synthetic down. Synthetic down is perfect for when you're active because it will keep you warm even if it gets damp from you sweating. It's absorbed by that synthetic down and it still helps to act as a layer to help keep you warm. It's great as an insulator if it's used as the outermost layer on top of your mid layers, but in a lot of cases, it's not going to be windproof. It's not going to be waterproof, but under the right conditions on calm, clear days, it can work. For this, I use a Patagonia Nano Puff, and I found that it's more than enough for many situations when combined with the right mid layers to get out there, stay warm on those calm days where there's not a lot of wind. You're kind of shooting maybe back at a distance, looking out toward the lakeshore. There's no wind. You're not getting blasted by water. It'll work great for those scenarios. Feather down is more of a static insulator. What I mean by that is it's what you want to wear when you're not active. It's warmer than synthetic. So, because of that, if you're wearing it when you're doing a high intensity activity or a hike, you're going to sweat more in it, and eventually it's going to soak into that down. It's going to get wet. It's going to start losing its insulating qualities. And if it gets bad enough, it can actually make you even colder. If it's exposed to the elements, it's damp, you're sweating, it's getting wet. All around, not a great situation. So, what I do is I use my synthetic down layer as my active insulator above my mid layers, and I keep a down coat in my backpack and use it once I get to where I'm going and I start to cool down from that activity. It's a fantastic static layer for when you're just taking your time, walking around the landscape, messing with your camera, looking for compositions, checking out shots. Even if you're just stopping to take a break, make food, maybe take a drink of water, you start cooling off because you're not active anymore, you can throw on that feather down coat and it'll start warming you up again. That's really when you want to be using feather down, when you're not active, when you're not doing something that's high output. I use a Feathered Friends EOS. I've really enjoyed it. It's great for when you cool down from your hike and you just need to start warming up again on location. It packs small enough to fit right into the top of my pack alongside an extra mid layer. And it does a great job at keeping me warm when I'm spending some time at a location, just hanging out, setting up to get the shot. Highly recommend getting one of each coat for each scenario. If you can only get one, I recommend getting a synthetic down coat because it will have more use cases outside of just being that static insulator. Now, one thing I do want to mention about using down, it can be used as the outermost layer, but it needs to be synthetic. And it always has to be the outermost layer because if you wear it and then put a bunch of fleece or something on top of it, when it's compressed, it's going to lose its insulating qualities. So it has to be that outermost layer to remain effective. One thing that I like to do is if I'm going to wear it as the outermost layer, I'll actually put a shell jacket on over the top of it to just help protect it. The shells are very lightweight. They're very easy to pack away if you don't need it. And that's what I want to talk about next. Hard shells are essential in the winter, especially if you're going to be approaching hikes and outdoor adventures in this way. Hard shells are essential. They're the outermost layer, and we need it to be durable. We need it to be made from high quality materials like Gore-Tex. It's actually what I use. I've had great experience with it. I actually have two different Gore-Tex outer shells and use them interchangeably depending on the seasons. The first and the one that I'm typically always using in the winter is the Norona Trollvigen Gore-Tex Pro Light. And in the shoulder seasons or summer, when I want something a bit more lightweight but can still handle the elements, I use the Norona Falcatin during shoulder seasons. It's lightweight, it breathes. Both of these coats are lightweight and breathe very well. They're very, very great tools. Each of them is waterproof, windproof. It's big enough to allow me to layer underneath without restriction. I chose these specifically because they offer a athletic fit, and that's something that I really wanted. I had coats previously that were more boxy and baggy. When the wind would blow, it would just kind of go up the inside of the coat and it kind of defeated the purpose of the coat. So, because they offer that athletic fit, I tried one, I loved it. I invested into the Norona ecosystem and it has just been great. All around great experience. To give you guys an idea of my body type, I'm 6'2", about 180 pounds, and a large in both fits like it was literally made for me. And the one thing that I really like about these coats are the pocket placements on each. They're up higher on the chest instead of being down by your waist. I believe it's actually called Napoleon pockets, but I could be wrong. But because they're higher up on the coat toward your chest, if you're wearing the belt on your backpack to help support you, you want to put things in your pockets, you can still use the pockets without having to take your pack off, without having to undo your pack belt and set everything down to rifle through what you've got. Really, really awesome system. In the winter, I put batteries in there, I put filters in there, I'll put snacks in there, whatever I need, I can fit in those pockets, and it's very easy to get to if I need it. And the best part about storing batteries there is that they're pretty close to your body. They're protected from the wind, the rain, the snow, whatever, and it'll help keep them warm so they last a little bit longer. Definitely something that is essential in the winter. Now, it is important to note, though, that neither of these coats are actually insulated. They're only Gore-Tex shells. I'm using my mid layers to provide and control warmth, and I'm relying on my shells to provide protection from the elements. If you're out there and you're looking for something similar, if you're torn between an insulated shell and an uninsulated shell, go with the uninsulated one because it's going to have way more long-term use cases in the field. Think spring, think fall. You can throw a light layer on, you can put the coat on, or you can go without any layers at all with a t-shirt under it if it's warm enough, and the coat is still going to provide you protection from the wind, the rain, the elements, and you can still use it all year round. It's that investment piece that I talked about earlier. You get the right tool for the job. It has multiple use cases across multiple different seasons and conditions, and it's really, really nice to have that flexibility in a piece of clothing that you're going to be using to protect you out there. The next thing that we're going to look at is lower body. Just like with the upper body, I combine layers on my lower body to help regulate my body temperature and stay warm. Typically, I'll combine merino wool long johns with fleece-lined sweatpants for maximum comfort and mobility when I'm out there. And over the top of that, depending on how cold it's going to be, I'm either going to use insulated snow pants or a Gore-Tex outer shell, depending on the conditions, the temperature, what I'm going to be doing that day. If I'm using insulated snow pants, I use Kiltech. It's a German brand. They make some really great options. I use the Kiltech Enosh as my insulated pair on really cold days. And then on days where it might not be as cold or I don't want the added weight of snow pants, I actually use a pair of Norona Trollvigen Gore-Tex Pro Light pants. They're basically the same as the coat. They're windproof, waterproof, lightweight, they're packable. It's just all around an awesome addition to your kit. I also really like the zippers on them. You can unzip them if you start getting warm. The zippers are on the sides, so you can kind of vent them out, let some air flow in, cool yourself off in the warmer months, or even if you start getting really warm in winter, you're taking a break, you can unzip, you can let that hot air out, cool yourself down a little bit. Actually, the coats have that too. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but the coats have those cooling zippers as well. Really, really cool feature. Something that I didn't really think mattered that much until I had it. And now I really enjoy using it. It really is that great. And one thing that I do want to point out here when it comes to pants, when it comes to lower body, avoid denim. Just don't use it. It's a terrible insulator. It's always going to be made worse by the cold. If you want to wear more of like a normal hiking pant or a normal pair of pants, get yourself a good pair of insulated technical pants or just general hiking pants. You can put your long johns on underneath. Really helps in those cold winter days. But for me, I don't like the feeling of pants under snow pants or under the outer shell. So I'll usually wear sweatpants combined with those long johns. It doesn't feel restrictive. It lets me move around freely. I don't have to worry about things bunching up. Everything just kind of flows. It's really, really nice in the winter to just stay comfortable. And that is part of that comfortable piece that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. When it comes to shoes, this is really more of a personal choice for each of us. Some people like boots, some people hate them. Some people like to wear regular tennis shoes in the winter. Whatever the case might be, you're going to need to make sure it's waterproof. You want to make sure it's warm. In winter, I personally always wear boots, but it's the only time of year that I actually wear them. I feel that they're pretty heavy and just it's more work to get through the landscape, especially if you're using snowshoes, but they really are the best option at keeping your feet dry and warm in the winter, and that's why I use them. I actually use a pair of Solomon Tundra Pro CSWP snow boots. They're waterproof, winter specific boots that are easily the warmest boots I've ever used. The insulation inside keeps you warm and dry down to -40. It's never failed me out there. I've used these on some incredibly cold days. My feet have always remained warm, my toes are warm. Combined with a good wool sock, you're more than warm enough to take on those really challenging conditions. Once the temperatures do get above freezing, though, I will typically transition over to a lighter hiking sneaker or a lighter hiking boot. I combine those with wool socks as well. Just again, make sure that whatever option you choose is waterproof. You don't want your feet getting wet out there. As it warms up, the snow starts to melt, there's water under it, the snow is just wet. It's going to soak through anything that isn't waterproof. So make sure that whatever option you're choosing is waterproof, insulated well. Typically, if I'm going to use a lighter sneaker or a lighter boot, I'm going to combine it with a real thick wool sock to help get me some more insulation. And that's where I want to touch on here next because there's two different types of socks that I actually really like using. And I know that to some degree, a sock might just be a sock, but in my experience, there are better options than others. For my normal everyday winter hiking socks, the wool socks that I'm using out there, I use Darn Tough Vermont wool socks. They're warm, they're comfortable, they're probably the best socks I've ever owned. They've got great cushion to them. They keep your feet warm when they're combined with the right type of footwear. Just all around, really, really great product. The cool thing about it is that in the warmer months or in the shoulder seasons, you can get different thicknesses of those socks that are also cushioned really well. They're really comfortable, but maybe they're not as thick. You can use them spring, summer, fall, winter. Really, really great product. Cannot recommend them enough. They are just awesome. Now, for those of you that are going to be out there, you're going to be near water, you're planning on getting into the water. Yes, even in winter, I recommend and use the NRS Boundary Socks. They're not only waterproof, but they keep you warm. They're made of neoprene. They're fully waterproof as long as the cuff up at the top is sealed to your leg properly. It's got an elastic cuff at the top that kind of seals out water. And it gives you the ability to walk out into those streams, maybe get closer to the shoreline if it's safe to do so. You can stand in the water as it rushes up to you and get those shots that but otherwise, soak your shoes, soak your feet, get you all wet. You don't want to be doing that when it's cold, but the NRS boundary socks allow you to go into those situations and get really unique shots, really cool perspectives, and stay warm and dry in the process. I actually have two different sizes of this sock because I really like it that much. I have a large that I wear as a standalone sock in the shoulder seasons, and then I have an extra large that I use to layer with a wool sock underneath in the winter, and it has worked phenomenally well. I've worn these in ice cold water, never had a problem. They keep you warm, they keep you dry. The thing about these socks, though, is that you're going to want to bring a lightweight pair of shoes with you to use when you're shooting in these conditions or using them so you're not getting your dry hiking footwear all wet. For that reason, I usually bring a water shoe made by NRS or a really lightweight hiking shoe in the spring, summer, or fall made by Merrell. Works really well, super lightweight. It's only a few ounces. You clip it to your pack, you throw your socks in your pack, and when you're ready, you can just sit down, throw the spare pair of shoes on. You can go out into the water, you can stand on the shoreline, you can sit there and safely take your images and remain warm. When I'm using these socks, I combine them with the NRS water shoes in winter, and I'll use micro spikes on those water shoes. You are going to need a size down from what you usually wear. I have found that that works best. Thankfully, I have a set for myself and for my wife. My wife's set is smaller than mine, and that's how I was able to kind of figure this out. You don't want to be walking around on ice. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be slippery. And if you get yourself into a situation where you can't get back out, it's going to be even more dangerous, especially if you're getting close to moving water, rivers, shorelines, that kind of thing. And that's what I want to touch on next, traction devices. The spikes that I recommend are the Catula micro spikes. The reason being is you want real spikes, not those coiled up springs that come on some traction devices. They're never going to work. They're dangerous. It's not a question of if you're going to fall, it's more when you're going to fall. Micro spikes are always the answer, especially in the Great Lakes. I promise they're worth it. They slip on right over your boots with an elastic band. The spikes themselves are metal. They help keep you planted in the ice and snow, especially when you're in those slippery areas. I keep them in my bag as soon as the snow flies, and I keep an extra set in my car just in case. They're always there until spring. You don't want to be out there walking around challenging these ice forms, getting too close to the edge. You need to have traction because if you do slip, things can get bad really quick. The other thing that I want to touch on while we're on traction devices is snowshoes. When you're not hiking on the ice, you want to consider what you need to do to get through deep snow, and that's where snowshoes become extremely important. In areas that are going to see deep snow, areas that you might want to hike, areas that just got hit by one of these big clipper storms that dump a lot of snow, you want to be using snowshoes because you don't want to be lifting your entire leg up to clear deep snow with a pack on your back, the weight of all your extra layers. It's not a good time. I did that for a few hikes and quickly realized it sucked. It was not the answer. Snowshoes allow you to stand directly on top of the snow without sinking into it. It makes it a lot easier to get around in the winter. For snowshoes, I use the MSR Lightning Ascents. They go on sale from time to time. They're a great bargain when they are on sale. You can usually find them for a pretty decent price. I bought the 30-inch ones that will hold up to either 250 or 300 pounds in the snow. When you're looking at these, you want to check out that manufacturer specification for length and weight capacity. It's very important because that's how you're going to determine what length of snowshoes you actually need. Different lengths will hold different weights. So for me, I'm about 180 pounds. My pack is typically somewhere around 20 pounds. So I considered myself at 200. And then I added another 15 pounds for my cold weather gear and around another 10 pounds for food, water, tent, anything else I might be bringing with me while I'm out there. I ended up on the 30-inch ones. They seem to be best for me. But again, you're going to want to look into that. You want to make sure that you have the right weight capacity for what you're going to be doing out there. Because if you step into that snow and you sink into it, it covers your snowshoes. Now you have to get your foot out of the snow with a snowshoe that's full of snow. It's not going to be a good time. It's going to be exhausting. It's going to be frustrating. Just make sure that you read those spec sheets and follow the manufacturer's guidelines when you're picking one out. Last but certainly not least, hats and gloves. I want to start with gloves because it took me a long time to get it right, and I feel that I suffered way more than I needed to because of it. But in winter, just use mittens. It's your best bet. They work substantially better than gloves that fit your fingers. In this case, I use and recommend the Hestra Army Leather Altitude Mittens. They're waterproof, windproof. They have an additional inner insulated shell to help keep you warm. And actually, underneath of those, I'll typically wear Black Diamond lightweight screen tap gloves that allow me to use the touchscreen on the back of my camera. I can operate it normally as needed. And then when I'm done, I can put my hand right back into the glove to stay warm. But it gives me that extra little layer of protection when I have to take my hand out of the mitten, mess with the camera, adjust the settings, do whatever I have to do. And I can put my hand right back in the mitten, get it warm again, keep my fingers nice and warm. You don't want your fingers getting cold and starting to hurt. It sucks. You're going to be distracted. It's going to ruin that creative flow. And if you're like me, when your fingers get cold, it hurts really, really bad. And I hate that feeling because it just feels like your fingertips are constantly pinched and it's just miserable. When it comes to hats, it really becomes dealer's choice on what you want to wear. But I personally recommend a wool hat. I use one by Fjällräven. It's a 1960 logo cap. It looks cool, keeps me plenty warm. It's wool. Great hat. It's going to be really cold outside. Sometimes I'll pair that with a Max Clava from Turtle Fur to help give me a little extra face protection from the elements, cover my head. And the really nice thing about using that in combination with that Alpine Onset Merino 150 hoodie I talked about earlier, you can flip up the hood on that merino wool base layer. You can put the Max Clava from Turtle Fur over the top of it, and then you can put your hat on top of that if you really want to stay warm, if the wind is really pounding. It gives you 3 layers of protection on your head. Huge plus. Highly recommend that combination. It has kept me warm in some extreme situations. Something that might seem a little unorthodox to some people, but it's something that I want to mention that also works really well with that same setup is bringing a helmet when I'm doing solo pursuits in the wilderness or hiking on rocky shorelines, doing anything technical. If I'm going to be alone, I'm bringing a helmet. If it's flat, groomed trail, I don't need to bring it. But if I'm going to be doing anything that requires me climbing up and down rocks, going down big hills or up big hills that might be covered in ice or have ice under the snow, I'm bringing that helmet. I use a Smith Maze MIPS helmet for all of my solo technical pursuits, just as that extra insurance. If you slip and fall and hit your head, you knock yourself out, nobody's coming. Nobody knows. You need to be able to self-rescue when you're out there. You need to be safe. I don't care how goofy it looks. I don't care what people think. I'm coming home to my wife and kids, even if I look like a goofball walking around with a helmet. Doesn't bother me one bit. The thing that I really like about that Smith Maze MIPS helmet is that it's insulated. Now, I mentioned that you can use that with the combination of headwear I also just mentioned. With the Alpine Onset Merino 150 hoodie, you can pull up that merino layer that covers your face and just leaves your eyes open. You can put on that Max Clava from Turtle Fur that basically does the same thing. And then you put that insulated helmet over your head, you're good to go. It'll keep you plenty warm. I've never had an issue with it. Very comfortable, very warm, and most importantly, safe. It's the big thing that I want to really drive home about this point is safety. Slipping, falling, hitting your head on something, it can lead to extremely bad things. You want to make sure you're safe. You want to make sure you're taking the proper precautions when you're out there. For me, this is a necessity. If I'm going somewhere where I think, hey, it could happen, the helmet weighs nothing. I'll strap it to the outside of my pack, bring it with just in case. This is another one of those instances of it's better to have and not need than need and not have. With safety in mind, there's one more thing that I want to mention that I really find essential out there, and that's trekking poles. They're a lifesaver. I recommend everybody use them. They're great any type of year, any type of hiking. But when you're on ice, you're navigating technical stuff, they become so much better. You can stick them into the snow in front of you. You can figure out what's ahead of you. If you're climbing up something with spikes on, snowshoes, whatever the case might be, and you just want that extra leverage, that extra traction to get over it or get through it safely, the trekking poles give you that. You can dig them into the snow. You can use them to keep your balance on ice. Really, really great addition to your kit. But the biggest and probably most important aspect is going to be that stability piece. You always want to maintain 3 points of contact, and they allow you to do that. They help you stay balanced, stable, planted, especially if you're on ice, like I mentioned. But the thing that I really like to use them for is figuring out what's in front of me as I'm hiking through really deep snow. If I'm walking and I know I'm in a technical area, I can stab the snow ahead of me, make sure there's no holes between rocks. If I'm coming up to a river or I'm by the water and I can't see where the ice starts, I can poke around, and as soon as I hear the sound change between the ground and the ice, I know I've walked up to ice. And then that way I can prepare myself. I don't accidentally walk out onto an ice sheet. I don't accidentally walk out onto a frozen river. Those are not things that you want to be doing out there, especially if you're by yourself. And I really enjoy using those trekking poles to just keep my stability and help me figure out what's ahead of me so that I'm not putting myself in dangerous situations by accident, whatever the case might be. Really great addition. I recommend anything made by Black Diamond. I use the Trail Ergo cork. Unfortunately, it's no longer in production, but I did recently purchase the Alpine Carbon cork model. It's been great. Really great pair of trekking poles. I've really enjoyed using them, but they are a bit on the pricier side. But really, anything made by Black Diamond or a reputable trekking pole brand, it's going to be more than enough. Just make sure that it's a good brand. Do your research, do your homework. I rely on Black Diamond. Never let me down. Really great company, great products. You want to make sure that you can trust them. That's the big thing. You want to make sure that you can trust them to keep you safe, get you there and back again. But that's it, guys. That's what I use out there for peace of mind, safety, and comfort here on the Great Lakes. Like I mentioned, I have included a blog post linked in the show notes that outlines everything and more, goes into a bit more detail on some things. If you have any questions about a specific item or piece of my kit, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you on your journey to the right gear, and I'll answer any questions I can within my ability. But I'll see you guys all next week. Get out there and enjoy this wild weather we're having. Think safe, be safe. Always let someone know where you're going to be and when they can expect you back again, especially in these cold temperatures like this. Be safe out there, guys. Thank you all for listening. Take care, everybody.